Hello, hello. Welcome, folks. We'll get started in about 5 or 6 minutes or so, but welcome to the webinar. Hello, hello. I'd like to do a little voice check. If you're here and you can hear me, I'd love for you to chat in the message that you can hear me okay. Thank you, Cole. Well, welcome. You're the early bird, Cole, so thank you for attending and being here on well in advance of time. So, like I said, we'll get started in a few seconds, or not a few seconds, a few minutes. Hey, Cole, while you can hear me, I'm going to turn my video on. Let me know if you can see me. If you see me on the bottom, I'm right here. This is Anthony. So, Cole, can you get a visual of me?
Anthony?
Yes, Jen.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, great. I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, is it good tone? Good sound?
Yes, great sound. Perfect.
Okay, I'm trying to think of how I can get you to see me.
You got to click on your webcam button. There you are. Oh, okay. Look, Olympics in the background.
I got the
How you doing?
flag. Is that good?
Perfect. That's awesome.
Hey, it was my dad's, and my dad had a thing with flags. He was a soccer coach, and he would coach AYSO, and he'd take 30 different countries' flags to these games and make it the biggest event ever for one recreational AYSO game.
Oh, I love it. That kind of passion. So we got Cole can hear us. He could see us. So we're in good shape. We just now got to let the crowd come in. So we'll give it a few more minutes and let people come in. In the meantime, you could click off if you want to stay on. I'm going to click my camera off for a few minutes until we get started, and we'll get everybody sitting and waiting.
But you and I can hear each other, right?
What's that?
We can still hear each other if you click your camera off.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay. Okay, I'm excited.
Perfect. Also, if you want to turn your microphone off and I'll introduce you, and when we get started, I can then have you click on your microphone so you don't have to, if you want to sip your coffee and have your drinks and water and stuff like that, you can do that. It's up to you.
You know what? I think I'll just keep everything on and be very quiet.
Okay, perfect.
Except for my alarm that's about to go off. Hold on. Okay. Are you back up?
Hey, Jen, did you got that? I texted you the link if you wanted that link.
Yes, I did. I said that to a couple. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, we usually, the registration, there's kind of like a timer that it doesn't allow you to register right up to the event just for registration reasons. I guess we could change that in the future, but I should have told you that. So
that's fine. I just had a special someone that wanted to see me.
Yeah, perfect.
Mom.
Sure. That's great.
Isn't that funny? She's like, I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, you posted something on Facebook today and I can't log on. It was really funny.
Yeah. Everybody that is here, and we only have a handful. I know we have a bunch more people that are planning on to log in. So again, thank you for coming. We'll get started in a few minutes. If you're watching the replay back, you might have to wait about 5 minutes, 10 minutes into this to really get started. So again, be patient. Thank you everybody for being on time, and we'll get started. I'm going to give it about another minute, and those who are late, they're late. We will record this so they could always get it afterwards. So one more minute, and thank you. All right, great. We're going to get started, everybody. It's Anthony Rusumano from Futureology, and I'd really like to welcome you to our parent Q&A on athletic recruiting tips. And we have a really special guest, and I'll be introducing her in a moment. But let me just give you an overview of this type of an event. And we did some of these in the fall, and these parent Q&As are there. Obviously it says parent, but students and student athletes can be here tonight. That's not a problem. But what this was meant for was an open forum for families and students to get a lot of information through a Q&A session. And it's on a Sunday night where parents might be more readily available. And so that's kind of what we're doing. We've had some good success in the fall doing that. And we'll continue to have some of these on different topics. So we thank you for joining us for the athletic recruiting tips. Again, my name is Anthony Rusumano. I'm the coordinator for college and career through CUSD, through the district, and it is a free service for you. My background, I've been a Division I college soccer player. I've been a coach. I've been down the avenue of being recruited. And so I want to share some of my insight with you and answer some of your questions having that background. So that is part of my role. And then I've been in just admissions and college admissions and been an expert in that field for over 20 years myself. And so again, I want to give you some advice and just share my knowledge with you about that. And so again, this is just an open forum of questions. We received a bunch of questions we'll get to, but you also have the ability to ask questions tonight. Somebody asked where you'll be able to find this recording later. Yes, we will have this on our website, and I'll kind of show you where that's going to be. So this will be recorded, so you don't have to take notes if you don't want to. The slides will be available. There'll be some handouts. Everything is going to be available on our website, and I'll show you that in a minute. In the meantime, again, I'm going to introduce Futureology. And for those that you don't know, we do one-on-one counseling as well as having group workshops. But tonight, especially, I'm really excited to have one of my friends, longtime friends for 15, 20 years. Jen, I forget how long I've known you, but a long time. But she's the president and founder of College Sports Quest. We've done a lot of joint events together and worked together for a long time, and she's been helping student athletes for such a long time with their recruiting game plan. She's an expert in the field. She continually meets with athletes in Orange County, especially helping them get recruited, helping them get scholarships. And then her background was an athlete too at CDM, for those who don't know, Corona Del Mar, and she earned a lot of varsity letters. You can see it on my board here. She went to college, was a swimmer. She also went to college at UC Santa Barbara and played volleyball. And she's won a lot of titles. And so she has a background in the industry. She knows what it takes, and she'll be able to provide that insight with you. So Jen, say hi to everybody for me.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. You guys are excited. I appreciate you guys joining us tonight. I'm sure some of you are probably on this. And then also maybe you have the Olympics streaming live, which, by the way, you will see the Olympic flag behind me. That was my father's. He passed away probably a little bit over a decade ago, and he loved collecting flags from every country. And he actually happens to have an Olympic flag, so I thought that I would include that tonight. So I'm so excited that you are all here. Please ask Anthony and I questions so that we can answer them. And thank you all again for your time this evening.
Great. And Jen's email is on the board if you can see it, Jen Noonan at collegesportsquest.com. If you have additional questions or want to follow up with her directly, and her website is there at collegesportsquest.com. So please reach out to her. Again, my email too is AJ Russomano, and you'll be able to find it at the Futureology website. AJ Russomano at Capo USD. Again, I'm with Futureology, and on the board you'll see just some of the services we provide to students and families in the district, if you did not know, where we do the one-on-one counseling, where you come to the mall during the evening session, and we'll meet with you and talk to you a lot about college applications, scholarships, test prep, anything like that. And we also have a lot of events like this, as well as in-person events. So if you go to our website right there, CUSD-Futureology.org/appointments-events, you'll see all the events we have coming up. You can register for those as well, or you can make a one-on-one appointment. With that said, we're going to jump in and get started. And what I want to do just first is kind of clear up some housekeeping. You'll find some abilities to make some chats and then to flag your chats as questions. So I'd really like for you to take advantage of that throughout the night. Whether you want to make a comment about something, we might ask you a question. We might want a comment from you, such as, how many of you are thinking about this sport or whatever. We might even ask you your sport. But you have an ability to click on the chat and then also flag it as a question. That'll help Jen and I be able to answer those questions because we'll see them pop up in the chat. So if you can do that throughout the night when you have a question, we would really appreciate it. We're also going to do some polls throughout the night where we might ask you a question. So we might just say what grade level you're in, and we might just ask you for that. So if you can answer those polls that we do throughout the night, we would appreciate it. It will help us get some insight into who's on our call tonight. And then we're also going to send some handouts where if we'll send it out to you, all you have to do is click the download button on your right, and you can save it to your desktop, and you'll be able to have that flyer or that information available to you at your fingertips, and you'll have it forever if you wanted it. So those are just some of the housekeeping things, okay? But before I get into the housekeeping, I'm going to just kind of give you a quick overview of athletic recruiting or just sports in general, because before I dive into anything and before we open up the questions, I really want you to understand that athletics, it's, some people go, well, if I don't get a scholarship, all else is lost. And it's really not. I mean, if you want to go to college, athletics is a fantastic way to show an admissions committee your passion, your character, a lot about you outside of your, what we call your quantitative numbers, your GPA and your test score. So this shows your maturity. It'll show your responsibility. It shows your commitment. So even if the coach doesn't know who you are, the school will really like who they see if you're really showing some consistency with the sport that you're playing, as well as some leadership and all the other characters that go with playing a sport. And I'm sure a lot of you know those things. So that's the first thing I want to say. It's not scholarship or bust. Okay, because a lot of us, you can go and then next, I'm going to play it for 4 years, and then maybe you get a scholarship your second or third year. Maybe you don't get a scholarship, but you like to play. So again, understand that athletics is one piece of the admissions puzzle. And by doing it, and again, I don't know you guys yet and how much you do it, it's still an important piece of that, okay? The other thing is that a lot of people don't understand the competition is quite fierce out there. Jen will tell you, I will tell you that it's really not that easy to play a college sport. I mean, I have it as a 5% chance, and we can break it down in certain sports. It's a 2% chance. And earning a scholarship is hard. So understand that it's not easy to do that. It just doesn't happen every day. I mean, yes, you see it in Orange County. We have a lot of fantastic athletes, but we don't know their stories and we don't know a lot of things. Sometimes they might say they're playing at a school and it might not even happen or materialize because their grades didn't keep up. So understand there's a lot that goes into it than just being a good athlete, and you have to keep that in mind. And even playing all 4 years, which I was able to do, is about a 1% chance. How many people dip off or they find other interests, which are okay. So understand that it is a process and you need to see what works for you and what's right for you. The third thing that I want to just start out by saying is once you're on a coach's list, there's some things they can do to kind of stretch some of the rules or work with the admissions committee. They are not the admissions committee. They don't get you into the school. Okay. But it's based on a few things. One, how important is that sport at that school? You know, if you're Notre Dame football you're talking about, well, that's pretty important at that school. So they might have a little bit more leeway. So that's number one. Number two, how high you're ranked on the coaches list. But that only happens later down the road in the recruiting process, and we might be answering some of those questions tonight. And a lot of times we don't even know where we are in that recruiting process or how high we're up on the list because we don't even know how to ask that. And then the third one, which is really, really important to me, is how strong academically you are, okay? And that's a big deal because at some schools that some of these athletes that I know want to play, especially in our district, they're talking about schools that they may be not academically fit for. And that makes it a lot tougher. So what I'm going to tell you tonight is that with great academics and test scores, it doesn't have to be great. It can even be average test scores and grades. It's going to help you be more marketable as a student athlete. So again, I just want to start by saying that before we really dive into a lot of the questions that we have. And that's kind of my piece on just kind of throw you my did you know. Now, I'll turn it over to Jen. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Jen, or if you had a few did you knows and anything that has come up over the years that you just kind of want to throw out there and let people just kind of know about. And if you don't, no problem. I don't want to put you on the spot here. But you have the Olympics in the background, and I'm feeling like you have something good.
I have something to offer. Well, first of all, I think for a lot of families, what's important to figure out is what's really important as far as if you're looking for the sport to help get you into a college, if you're really looking for some type of athletic or academic scholarship, or if maybe you're just an athlete and you really want to play. And depending on which of those facets are most important to you and in which order, depends on how you approach this process. And it's completely different for an athlete that has the talent that wants to play at an Ivy League school versus a student athlete that wants to go to another school where they might be pushing the envelope academically, but like you've mentioned, maybe the coach can help with that process.
Awesome. Great points. And it's really, it's when we meet with a lot of families in our district, we talk about what your goals are. That really kind of drives that, what you're really thinking. And it's going to be different for everybody. So you really got to look at yourself individually and find out what works for you and your family, what your goals are. And I think that's going to start it all. And again, if you want to come in and talk with one of our counselors about either this process or about kind of what you should be thinking about, we can help you do that. But in the essence of tonight, again, it's meant as a Q&A to ask your questions. But before we do that, I'm going to do a quick poll. Jen, what I want to find out from my audience here is just in first of all, what's your grade level? Are you in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade? I'd love to kind of ask you guys that. So if you can see the poll up there and please kind of chime in. If you're a parent, what grade is your student athlete in? All right. Oh, wow, we even got some 6th and 8th graders here, but the majority of 10th and 11th, a few 9th graders. Okay. Jane, can you see the poll on the board?
I can.
Perfect.
So in the 6th to 8th grade, we're looking at a 6th grader, a 7th grader, or 8th grader. I don't know if they can chat.
Yeah, if you could chat, chat that in for us. Chat that in and what specifically. And then thank you everyone else for that poll. So again, that's just an example of some of the technology tonight. We just want to kind of know what kind of audience. We're kind of a mixed bag, but that'll help us out a bit. All right, so that's poll number 1. And let's just see if we got, so yeah, again, if you were at 6, if you listed 6th through 8th grade, if you can chat it in specific. So it's an 8th grader.
All right. Jen. So the reason that I'm asking is because nowadays parents, I actually consult a lot with tween parents, I call them preteen. And really the question is, which high school should I send my talented student athlete to? We are a part, at least in our area, of the Trinity League, which some of you may know and some of you may not, are private schools, Mater Dei, Santa Margarita, St. John Bosco, J. Sarah, and Servite. Is really arguably the toughest league in the entire country. And so there are a lot of decisions that parents need to make. And I know a lot of you have questions about which high school you should send your child to. Does it matter? Does the sports really matter at that school? Can they still get a scholarship or into a great school by going to a smaller school? And obviously, those are questions that need to be answered because it is a big decision on where you send your child, not only to college, but also to high school.
Great. All right, I'm going to throw another poll out there before we start taking some questions. Here's my next poll. And here we go. Again, it's going to be anonymous, so we don't know who's answering this question. So at what level do you think you're being recruited? And I kind of have a little chart here. And it's kind of, grade levels from frosh through seniors and whether you're heavily or not at all being recruited. And you might not know, and you're just taking a guess at it. Okay. All right. So, Jen, it looks like we have a lot of not at alls, which is fine. It just kind of gives us a sense of the room. And again, on the screen right now, you can see this little matrix that I've put together here based on, where you think you are. So for example, if you're thinking you're being moderately recruited and you're a sophomore, that means you've probably gotten some, letters and some camp invites and some questionnaires to fill out. And it's a good amount of that. That means you would be moderately recruited, and you may or may not be. You might go, well, shoot, I only got one letter. Well, then maybe you're not being moderately recruited. Now, part of this isn't to kind of correct you, but to kind of get you on the track to understanding how it all works and then what you need to do. But being that we have so many people that are not at all being recruited, maybe our questions and the direction we give you might be a little different, okay? But again, thank you for participating. But again, Jen, it looks like most of them lightly recruited or not at all in our sense. So, and again, we have a lot of juniors on the call, which means that there's things that need to happen this year for them to even make this happen. And again, it doesn't mean if you're not recruited, you can't play that sport in college. That doesn't mean that at all. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. So again, thank you for the poll. Jen, is there anything else you want to know? I think those are the only two polls I had here, but we can ask them to chat something in first. So if you think of a question you want to ask these guys, my last question is going to be just through chat. What sport are we talking?
I'm sorry, Anthony, if I may. So just to give you guys an idea, college recruiting has been happening early and earlier. So you actually hear in some sports, I think we heard of a fifth grader, I'm not joking, that's committed to a college, verbally committed. It's ridiculous. But understand that, so just to give you an idea of percentages, to kind of give you an idea of where you are not yet, and where you're trying to get to in this process, which is what Anthony talked about a little bit. So about 25% of high school freshmen are actually identified by college coaches during their freshman year in high school. All right. And about 35 to 40% of prospects are identified in the sophomore year. And then maybe about half or a little less than half are actually identified in the junior year. And these are by college coaches. So it's happening earlier and earlier. That's not to say that you can't get caught up, but for the family or for the student athlete that, would like to play at a certain level, and maybe it's their junior year and maybe things aren't happening yet, that just kind of gives you a little bit of idea of just from a college coach's perspective.
Great. And also too, those numbers too, based on the sport, some sports are, they're going to get them early and earlier, like football and basketball and stuff. And other sports, they might take a longer time, and they might be targeting you sophomore, junior, and that happens, and they're different in sports. So my next question, if you guys can chat this in, that I'd like to know is, what sport are we talking about? What sport are you playing that you're committed to right now? So I'd like to see all the sports on the board, whether we have some soccer, some volleyball, softball, tennis, whatever it may be. Just check them up there. That would be great. And if you don't and you want to abstain, not a problem. So, fencing. Fantastic. I will stay away from you. I don't need to be, sliced here. Baseball. Great. So we got a mix: golf, soccer, volleyball, baseball. Okay, fantastic.
So that's actually really great. But I will tell you that every single one of those sports, the process for recruiting is completely different. All right. So it's really important to start to understand how recruiting works and important timelines for your sport specifically. So for football is very different from basketball, from volleyball, from golf, from baseball, from fencing. If you have questions after, I'd be happy to, answer them. But just to let you know, it's very different for each sport.
Yeah. Okay, we got a question on the board. I'm going to hold off on that, Delphi. We'll get to it for sure. But I'm going to kind of move on, start answering some of the questions. So I'm going to ask you to start throwing some questions out. Two, we actually had some questions pre-submitted that we're going to kind of go through. But along the way, please start talking about the questions. But I want to touch on something else because before we kind of get into some of those questions. But a lot of people thought, like, hey, not at all. We're not being recruited at all. And a lot of juniors were on the board again. So if you're not being recruited and you want to be recruited, and there is a process that goes with that. And that process is a lot of work on your part if you want to make that happen. And as Jen pointed out, some people are getting identified their sophomore year, even their freshman year. And if you're not one of those candidates, doesn't mean you can't be identified, but it's probably going to have to be coming from your side of things, meaning that you're going to have to be proactive in this process. So it's a lot about being proactive, and we can talk a little bit more about that if you ask some more questions on it. But I did an event during the college fair this fall, if some of you attended our college fair at Capo Valley High School, and I recorded my session, and it's on our website. So if you go to CUSD-Futureology, and you go to the college fair tab, you can watch that back. So I highly recommend you watch that back because I give you specific ways to kind of start the proactivity to help you get recruited, from some online profiling to actually some coaching communication and stuff like that. So please watch that, and that'll kind of give you a step about that, and it'll give you some tangible things to work towards, okay? So with that said, I'm going to throw some questions out, and Jen, field them. If you want me to take part in answering some of those, please do. But here's the first question that came in earlier. Actually came in probably 3 weeks ago, early on, and it was about thinking about Division I. So in my mind, it sounded like the student was like, "Hey, I want Division I or bust" type of thing. And what are your thoughts about that? And let's give some perspective on that.
Okay, so first of all, Division I, only about 20% of colleges that compete in the NCAA are actually Division I schools. So if you start this process, which I get it, we're in beautiful Southern California, we're in Orange County, we're educated, it's a very affluent community. A lot of our families, a lot of our parents, a lot of us went to some really great, well-known schools. But unfortunately, that's changed. It's just, it's so incredibly competitive. In fact, I think it was 2 years ago, Notre Dame turned down 400 valedictorians. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I would say that to try to be open in this process and open-minded to looking beyond just Division I or just schools that you are aware of. And one of the ways to do that, parents, is to try to look at maybe Division III or maybe Division II or maybe NAIA level schools and go get on some college campuses and go visit. Division I or bust, yeah, if you are one of the best, strongest talent in the country in your sport, you will get noticed very early on. You have quite a bit of talent in this area. But if not, it's okay to look beyond Division I. There's some phenomenal schools out there.
Great. And I'm also going to put it into terms of, we get a lot of students that come in and talk about their college list. And these are non-athletes, let's say, that, or they might be athletes too. And I see, they have Yale, Harvard, Stanford, where they have these upper echelon schools in what we call the Ivy Leagues. It's kind of the same concept. Should I only apply to Ivy League school? Well, if you did, you might not even get into any of those schools, and you're not necessarily always being realistic because they might be a reach school too. So when we think about Division I or bust, if you only focus on those, you're kind of limiting your options, number one. Two, and if it's not realistic, then you might not end up with anything. And so when I talk to my students, my student athletes especially, we try to create lists and targets that actually give you the most options and the most opportunities. And if it was, all eggs in one basket, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot sometimes. Okay. So,
and if you want to know, if you're curious, if you are Division I or not, I'd be happy to provide you with information college coaches give us. We have every single sport by every single position and every single time that will give you of parameters that you need to meet, minimum requirements to compete at those levels. And we will provide you, I'd be happy to provide you with that information, so you can email me if you'd like.
Great. We have a couple questions on the board, and I'm going to hit those questions that came in through the chat because some of them were actually submitted questions or similar. And so Delphi is talking about receiving letters already, which is great, but not sure if she wants to run in college. And the idea of filming the running. So basically, we talk about videotapes and things like that. And they're wondering if that applies to different sports, and running seems to be more about times. What do we think about that and running? I have some thoughts. Jen, why don't you start us off?
So I'm just curious, Delphi, if you can just let us know what high school graduation year is your son. I'm just curious. So first of all, filming in cross country is not important. Your son will not get recruited off of a cross country film. I have yet to meet a parent that could run a full race with their son or daughter, right? So that's not as important. However, if your son is receiving letters that are unsolicited, and maybe he's even a sophomore, that does mean something, and you should definitely pay attention to that. Although track is really about times, which they actually base your time off of a mile time mark. They want to see that. Definitely, it has just as much to do with trying to build a relationship and a rapport with college coaches. It's not just your time.
Great. And Jen, too, I don't know if this is through mine, too. It sounds a little statically from your end, so I don't know if, but I don't want you to mess with anything, so then we can't see or hear you. But it's just it just started. So
it just started. Maybe it'll go away.
Yeah, maybe. I hope so. No, that's all right. Just all right. And then it's Jen kind of hits it on the head, like with running, and it is about times and everything. So filming isn't that important. Something like that, though, technique and showing technique, and if a coach wanted to see that, there might be some possibility in that. But really, with some sports like running or swimming, we're talking about times. If you're talking about golf, you're talking about your scores and stuff like that. So the videos might not be as important. Again, I think as you go through the process and talking to the coaches and even asking them to see if that, again, I don't know where you are and what coaches you're talking to and the letters that you got and what they're requesting of you, but you want to keep your ears and eyes on the pulse of some of those coaches and what they're looking for from you, because it may or may not help. But again, usually about times. Another question that came in from Whitney on the chat was about the role of camps. And it was one that we had as a submitted question. People always wanting about these ID camps. One was exact soccer. So this, I'm assuming Whitney plays soccer and stuff. But about an 8th grader doing camps, does it make a difference if our goal is to use her sport to help her get into Tier 1 academic school? So Jen, if you can talk a little bit about the value of camps or ID camps or showcases, all those things that are kind of going on.
Okay. So just to let you all know, there is a lot to know about camps. In fact, I actually do workshops, webinars with my clients alone that are an hour and a half just to answer your questions. So to keep it simple, first of all, the best camp to go to is a school that you want to attend. Secondly, nowadays there is so much money to be made, whether it's recruitme.com, whether it's exact soccer, whether it's a showcase, show ball, and a different sport. Showcase, tournament, camp, etc. it's important also to understand why you're sending your son or daughter to camp. What is the goal? Is the goal to get them, for them to learn some skills and get better? Or is their goal to try to get exposure to college coaches, which obviously the goal is then to get recruited? So, and those are important, obviously, questions that you need to answer, and they're different for each family. I can tell you sport like baseball, yes, baseball, you're going to be running around to probably at least 10 or so showcase events probably every summer. That's how you're going to get looked at. Whitney, to answer your question, does your daughter as an 8th grader need to be going to soccer camp? If she does, I think it should be for her to go and have fun. And I also think that it should be somewhere that maybe she might have an interest in going eventually. But going to a camp, probably less than 1% of those that attend camp actually get noticed. So what I tell families is that whenever you go to a camp, it is critical. It is so important that the coach knows about you before you ever get to that camp.
Oh, sorry, I didn't have my microphone on. The last line Jen said was the most important piece about notifying the coaches before you come to camp. So Whitney and everybody else on the call, camps have some value for exposure, but a lot of factors go into it. What are you doing outside the camps? Do you play in a certain club team? What kind of exposure are you already getting? Because maybe you don't need the camp or the showcase. I don't know. But the big thing is if you're having direct communication with the coach and they know you're coming, that's the most value you're going to get out of it, because then they can see you firsthand. If you don't know and just show up at a camp because somebody sent you a letter and you pay the money, just because you got an invitation doesn't mean they know you're coming. Then you're doing it wrong. You need to notify ahead of time. They know you're coming, what session you're coming to, and that they're going to be there so they can see you. Otherwise, sometimes you're just wasting money. So it is very deliberate in how you attend camps. It's not just going at them randomly. So that's what I would say about camps. And again, some will be more valuable than others in certain sports, as well as what your background is and what kind of exposure you're doing at the high school level, at the club level as well. So it's really going to depend. And so I would just say, be careful, number one, and two, make sure you're in communication. Okay. And hopefully that answers.
Just to add to that before we switch away from camps, if at all possible, make sure the coach has seen a video on you, A, and B, you've actually talked to that college coach on the phone before you ever attend camp, and that will give you a huge advantage when you attend camp.
Great. All right. By the way, these are great questions coming in. Keep them coming in. I know, Eric, I chatted you back, and Eric wanted to know a little bit more about the recruiting process. And that's such a big topic, Eric, that we would take up so much time. So if you can kind of, I think through some of the submitted questions, we'll get to some of that stuff. And Jen just mentioned another. On that
just really quickly in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'd love that. 2 minutes. Here's the 2-minute version, Eric.
All right, so Eric, this is the 2-minute version, okay? First of all, the recruiting process starts with, understanding, obviously, college athletics, all right, the process, and then implementing a marketing plan, okay? And the reality is that probably 98% of families start this process incorrectly, and which ends up costing them a lot of time, money, and maybe eventually a player scholarship opportunity, even admissions, all right? So the first thing to start the process, the question is, how good is your son or daughter? That's the first question, because from there, you need to come up with a list of colleges that you need to target. And this list isn't the top 25 Division I programs that we've all heard of, right? This list realistically should be a list that your son or daughter has the talent academically as well as athletically, if they really do want to play, or if they really do want their sport to help them get into college. So once you have that in place, then you need to implement a marketing plan and create a strategy that is different from all the thousands of other prospects out there. And that's some of the things that I help families with. So that just gives you an insight of at least how to start the recruitment process.
And Eric, again, the video I mentioned about the college fair, I talk about some of these marketing assets, I call them assets, such as your social media, as well as calling, emails, and stuff like that. Check that out, and that'll give you some insight into that recruiting process, or what Jen's talking about, the marketing plan. Some of us go like, marketing, what are we talking about? And we're really talking about branding yourself in this process, because you are a brand. Like, who are you? And that's what we want to show to the coaches. And so the marketing plan is about creating that positioning about you as a student athlete. And what does that look like? And so, again, watch that, check it out. But we'll hit on some of these things as we go through this a little bit more. So I'm going to move on to the next question. Actually, we have on the board here. Keep them coming in through the chat. But the other one was, how many schools or coaches should I target? Okay, a very blanket statement. And Jen, I'm happy to answer it. I'll let you answer it. Again, we're kind of going back and forth, which I love. So you'll say something, I'll say something, you'll say something. So.
Okay, so first of all, it's interesting. So one of the things that I have my athletes do, because think about it, parents, I get it. You've already been thinking about this process for a really long time, and then you're trying to get your son or daughter actively involved. You go, well, come up with a list of schools. They don't know. I don't know if you really quite know, and then you come up with a random list of however many schools. So one of the things that I suggest that student athletes do, and you can actually do this on your own, you can do it tonight, you can do it tomorrow, is come up with a list of 10 colleges. And these 10 colleges should be different competition levels. They should be Division I, Division II, and Division III, okay? And what then these student athletes should do is go on to the website, go onto the athletic website, which is very easy to get to, and go ahead and research the freshmen on that team, on any college team. So let's say UCLA, you are a baseball player. Go look at the profile of a baseball player at UCLA. Because what it's going to do is it's going to do two things really quickly for the student athlete. You're either going to go, whoa, oh my gosh, he's really good. I'm not anywhere close to that level. Or you might be very surprised, especially the talent in this area, and be like, wow, I've already surpassed where that athlete is. So that, I think, can really help as far as when coming up with a list of schools. As far as targeting a number, I think when you're starting out this process, I think at least 25 colleges is very realistic, but that is a number that you have done a little bit of research on. If not, you really want to play and you're looking for an athletic scholarship, you need to target quite a bit more. But no, it doesn't need to be 600, 700 colleges. That's not realistic.
Right. 1,000 would be good. No, but now Jen makes a good point. I'll take it a step further and I'll quantify some things, just because we also talk to our students in the district. And, when we talk to seniors about how many actually you end up applying to, we're kind of in a range between 8 and 12 is a good number to actually apply to. But that's applying to. Okay. The research process and the getting to know different schools is going to be much higher. For non-athletes, it might not be 25, 50, 60 or something like that. But for athletes looking to get recruited or getting scholarship opportunities, that number can be 50 to 100. We just don't know. It's going to depend on what your goals are, what your options are. For example, if you don't want to go, if you just want to stay on the West Coast, you're going to have a smaller number of options. So you might not have as many schools. If your grades are in a certain range, it's going to limit those things. And so every student in our district, if you don't know, has access to Naviance. If you haven't used Naviance, it's a college management tool that you're able to do some college searching on. And I would suggest you go there first if you haven't started any lists yet. And if you've seen some of our stuff, we kind of refer to that a lot. But you're going to be able to do a couple things. One is sort the colleges based on your criteria. One of them being your sport. So if you play football, you can throw football in there. If you play soccer, you throw soccer in there. That's only one piece of it. There's other things that we look for in a college. Number one, location. Maybe there's some states you don't want to go to Alaska. We can rule that out. And you're able to do this with this search tool. So you're going to be able to come with, and I like Jen's idea of list 10 schools, but sometimes, again, we pick 10 and they're all over the board. This might at least get you some schools on your list that have the other things you would want in a college experience. Location. It's in a major city or a college town. I want a school in a college town, or I want a school that has certain types of internship programs, or I want a school that has a certain major. Great. You can throw that into this search list. And I'm saying that we should have a list, at least for a lot of my sophomores and my freshmen and my juniors. We should be looking in the 50 range. It might even go up to 100 if you're really trying to vet out scholarship. Now, if you're my juniors now, you might not have the ability to throw 100 schools and research them and visit them and do all that. But if you're younger, you can start the process of learning about these colleges. And there's a lot more now if you add sports in the mix. For example, who's the coach? What kind of style do they play? Could I play for that coach watching a game? Could I actually play on that team? So there's other factors that go in it. But when we're talking about targeting schools, you've got to think about some of those aspects. There's still more to it, such as academic fit, like I talked about earlier. If you don't have the numbers, if you're far from the numbers to even get into the school, and you're only an average player for that D1 program, it's probably unlikely. Okay, so you also have to be realistic. But you can have the school on the list early, but by the time you become a junior, senior, that school might be removed. You can have it early on, but as you go through the process, it might come off the list. So anyway, you might start with a bigger list of schools. And I've had some athletes before that had 50 or 100 on their list early on, and then it dropped down to 50, which dropped down to 25, which dropped down to 12. So anyway. So that's kind of an answer to that question. Here's another question coming in just on the chat. Anna says, can your sport help you get into a school that has your sport but is not under the NCAA umbrella?
I would say that there's few sports that do that. The one sport that would be rowing, I would say. But unfortunately with the club, a club affiliation, and it's not under NCAA, really does not have a whole lot of say. However, and this is important, club sports do recruit. So there's still recruiting involved in club sports, very much so.
Yeah, exactly. And these types of sports, they don't have pull with the admissions and stuff, but they will recruit because they want, I know a lot of my friends back and they played lacrosse and they would recruit players and everything, but they had nothing to give them, but they would still recruit them saying, hey, this is competitive and you get to do this. And again, that's something you have to determine. Hey, do I want to go to that school? Some people who do dance and some people do cheerleading and some people do other things too. There'll still be some recruiting involved, but maybe you're not getting something from it. But again, the sport in itself will help you if it does a couple things. It shows your commitment. There's my thumb for number one, commitment. It shows things like leadership, those things like character. And if you're applying to a school where you can talk about your experiences and say, let's say your essay, and you're talking about your sport and what it's done for you and the experience you've had, it's going to help you get in. So yes, it can, because the sport does a lot more things than you might think it does. When I look back and I go, oh man, it taught me about teamwork and it taught me about all these different things. And some of my values come from that. Family is a value that I got from sports from an early age on. Those things go into your essays and they come out in your application. So ultimately, Anna, it can help you, and maybe not in the exact ways that you might think it can, but it comes out in other aspects of the application. Hopefully that helps. All right. We have another question on the board. I heard from my coach the school would be a great fit for me. How can I figure that out? Jen, or do you want me to take this one?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm going to come from the standpoint of that there's a lot of pressure put on coaches these days to get their athletes recruited. And parents want to know, well, what are you going to do for my son or daughter, and how involved are you going to be in this process? And, the reality is that what's right for one student may not be right for another. And the typical number of college coaches that any coach knows, any high school coach, any club coach, any travel ball coach, is probably maybe 6 to 12. That's it. And if they say that they know more, then ask them to name them. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because if your coach says, hey, I know a program that might be a great fit for you, great, then you can check it out. But that might be a good athletic fit, but it might not be a good academic fit. So.
Great point. And those are the things you need to be asking yourself. You need to do your process or your part on the interview side of things. The coaches have some agendas, and you might not think they do, but they do, as Jen pointed out. But you have to come from your side. So I'm going to talk about that perspective. From your side of things, what things you need to figure out are things such as the academic fit of the school. I know plenty of student athletes. I had some of my teammates that came to a UC school. They were great players, but they couldn't handle the academic rigors. And then they were academically ineligible really early on, and then they forget their career. So can you manage the school in general? Is it have the social fit that you want? Can you deal with the coach? Again, some of these coaches know, hey, you could be a great fit for this school, but maybe that style doesn't work for you possibly. So you need to then talk to your coach. When you say a great fit, do you mean how they play and my soccer ability or my, baseball? What else do you know about the school? By the way, did you know I want to major and study this? Oh, the coach would say, well, maybe I don't, because maybe that school doesn't have those types of classes you want. So what I would say, you need to have an open communication lane with your coach that is saying, hey, these are great fits for you. And they need to know some of the things, what makes a great fit for you. And if you give that to them, such as, coach, I like this type of school. I like a smaller school with smaller classes because I need more personal attention. This is the kind of style I want to play. This is what I want to study and I want to learn. If you give that to the coach, then they'll know what a great fit for you is. But usually what happens is they go, well, you're a good soccer player or a good whatever, volleyball player. You should go to this school. And they don't think about all the other things that are important to you. You need to share that with them. Okay? So that's how I'll answer that. Is it a bad idea to want to stay close to home? What do you think about that choice?
No, it's not a bad idea at all. We have great colleges in this area. There's nothing wrong with that. The question is, if you want to stay close to home and you want to play your sport, I think it's important to understand that, especially in California, we have Division 3 or Division 1 level players playing Division 3. It's highly, highly competitive at any level, especially in California, as far as athletics is concerned. But there's nothing wrong with wanting to stay close to home. But I mean, just you go down to San Diego and you have Division 3, Division 2, Division 1, and NAIA schools, within a short mile radius.
And also, what's close to home is going to school in Arizona close versus school in New Jersey. They're both a plane flight. So, what do you consider close? So, again, I would be thinking about, what does close mean to me? Can I drive home? Is that I need to be close to home where I can drive home? Or maybe it's a drive. It's 3 hours drive, or a couple hours from Santa Barbara, but a flight from Arizona, hey, I can get home in the same amount of time. So I would suggest looking more into, what do I mean by being close to home? But the minute you put some stipulations or parameters around your choices, you limit the amount of opportunities for you, for either scholarships, for merit aid and different things. And so the more open you can be, the more opportunity you have.
That's right. I saw Whitney's question come in.
Oh, sure.
So Whitney's question, which is a great question, was, for team sports, with differing roles, a midfielder versus a forward, for volleyball, libero versus a hitter. What's the take as far as if a university doesn't currently need that position? How does that really affect you in this process? It happens all the time. So, for example, one year a college coach may have all their recruiting needs filled, and if they bring in a large freshman class, then they may not be recruiting that position as a sophomore or even as a junior. So it's really important that you understand specifically, what positions or type of player is that coach recruiting for your recruiting class. Because the reality is that let's just say you are a libero, which, by the way, unless you're probably one of the top 25 liberos in the entire country, that is a very, very difficult position to get recruited for. For those of you that aren't involved in volleyball, it's a back row player that they made into a position years ago, which is great for smaller sized players. But think about it. How many of the players that are currently in college that are sitting at the bench, riding the pine, as they would say, would love an opportunity to play in the backcourt? And now you're going to become and get a scholarship as a libero. So it's very difficult. So I guess that's the best way to answer. It depends on what the recruiting needs are, and it changes like that. And how does it change? It changes because sometimes players don't return, players get injured, players are ineligible, players are burned out. So look at the rosters and look at the depth of the program. And if you looked at it 3 months, 6 months later, it'd probably be totally different because it changes.
And what I would also say with that, and it's a great question, is that part of this recruiting process, and Eric asked about, how does the recruiting process work? Well, I'll tell you how it works. Part of it works is the communication you have with that coach. You need to be asking them, and what Jen pointed out is like, what's their roster look like? Great. Talking to the coach, asking, hey, this is the position I'm playing. What is your need? And actually feeling comfortable to ask them that. One, it makes you look responsible and mature as a player, but also it's open dialogue. This is the kind of dialogue that's going to help you determine if you would want to even play for a coach like that. If you can have that type of communication, you can show that you're a leader, you're a good communicator. That's going to help in volleyball. The coach is going to like you, and that kind of interaction helps in the recruiting process, guys. And so it's really important to actually, this is the kind of question, it's a great question to ask coaches. If you play soccer, if you're in volleyball, what are your needs going to be? Or I noticed that you have three, forwards you're recruiting or that are juniors here. What am I going to get some playing time, or what's that going to look like? Or maybe you're okay not playing as a freshman, or maybe you go, I need to be playing as a freshman. So again, this goes even to our goals. If you want to be playing as a freshman, then you probably don't want to go into a school that has a ton of junior class that are really good, and you're not going to get the opportunity. That's part of stuff that you have to figure out. Otherwise, if you don't do that, then what happens is you ride the pine, as Jen talked about, and you're sitting there and you're unhappy and you're looking to wait for a transfer. But if you did your research right and you did your communication with your coaches right, you could have avoided that. So what we're trying to do is be proactive in the communication, and that'll help you determine some of those needs you need to assess to determine what needs to happen. Now, everything is not going to be as easy of getting that information. It's going to be a process, and it's going to be some work. But the more work you put on that front end, it's going to help you make a more informed decision later. And you're in the right program, in the right sport, and all that stuff. And it's going to work out much better for you. Okay. Great question, Whitney.
Yeah. So, take Stephen's question?
Sure.
So Stephen just asked a great question, which when are college coaches allowed to make direct contact with a student athlete, and what's the best way to communicate with them before that? Stephen, if there's any way you could let me know what the graduation year in sport is of your son or daughter, that'd be great. So typically, before September 1st of the junior year, in all sports except men's basketball, college coaches are allowed to send recruiting questionnaires or camp information, and that is it. All right? So you often hear, well, a sophomore is already committed to play baseball at UCLA, right? Well, what happens if a college coach really wants to get in touch with you before your junior year, which does happen more often than not, and you'd be surprised, then typically what they do is they will contact one of your coaches and say, have this student athlete contact me. All right. So just to let you know, it's at September 1st, the junior year. That's when phone calls can start to happen from college coaches in some sports, and that's when recruiting totally changes. But a lot happens before then. The sophomore year is really the most pivotal year in this process. All right. And it's because there's so much that's involved. It's because of the recruiting rules that have changed. So, for example, what can you do before then? Let's say you have a sophomore or freshman. It depends on the sport. Do you need to be sending a freshman video out for a football player? No, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And don't let anybody or any recruiting service sell you on the fact that you need to do that, because there's no college coach on this planet that will look at anything other than varsity level film, and that's really for any sport. So back to a second question: what can you do before college coaches can start contacting you? Well, you actually can contact them. So if you're a freshman or sophomore, I recommend that you contact them and you start sending information, sending updates, at least maybe quarterly or once a month, depending on where you are, and also depends on how good you are. I mean, if you are if you're Division I level talent, then yes, you need to do something at least as a sophomore. If you're JV, both as a freshman and sophomore in your sport, then maybe you wait a little bit longer. So it just depends.
And this kind of ties into some of the submitted questions here, like when do I start the recruiting process? Somebody started as a junior and got a scholarship. Again, there's all different cases, all different sports. You have to take your individual case and kind of look at it that way. You can't go, well, they started as a junior, I could start as a junior. And it's not always the case, and you're different athletes and different players and different personalities. So the earlier is better. You can start the communication process with these coaches and start creating a relationship, because ultimately the coaches are choosing athletes that they think they're going to trust, that they like, that they have good character, that they're a good athlete as well. But they have all these things that they know about the student, whether they talk to some of their coaches but again, there's a lot of things you can do ahead of time, from your club coaches, and have recommendations and different things like that are part of this process that you can do and get on your own, that'll help you with the communication process. So, but again, another great question. Keep them coming in. I got one up front. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
It's never too early to start this process. And the earlier that you start the process and the more realistic you are with yourself and with your son or daughter, and they understand where they can fit in talent-wise, the better off you'll be in this process. It doesn't have to be that long, but you need to be engaged in it, and you need to be realistic if they really want to play and if they really want the sport to help them get into a great school.
Great. Okay, we have another one in here about smaller colleges like D3 and about scholarships. Jen, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so basically Division III, we only have a few more minutes here, but Division III does not offer athletic, but they offer scholarships based on academic, merit, and student achievements. If you're looking for any type of money, whether it's an athletic scholarship, an academic scholarship, any type, your best chance is at a Division III college. Great
point. Well said. They are the percentage of money going out for D3 is more than any other division. So don't discount it. And I know I played some Division III schools when I was in soccer, like UC San Diego at the time. They would kick our butt. They would have guys from Sweden coming over, and they would just kick our butt sometimes. And you go, well, we're Division I. How's that possible? And the competition can be really good. You gotta keep an eye open for that. We'll take some more. We got one here. Tips on how to start the communication with coaches, what to say and what not to say. Anna, that's a very loaded question. There's so many things you can go on about communication and coaches. Jen, you want to give a couple little things that they can do to start the process with the coaches?
Yes, you can send them a letter and introduce yourself and tell them a little bit about you. You can either get that information, sample letter to a college coach, and Google it. You can ask me afterwards. I don't know what year your daughter is or son. No, 2019. I didn't know which sport though. So definitely introduce yourself to college coaches. Tell them who you are, and try to get them to look at a video. I would not send a letter, especially if you were a junior at any time, other than maybe a freshman. Send a letter to a college coach unless you have a video with it.
And like Anna, what not to say? Well, I like to slice people's legs with my, when I'm fencing. No, you don't say stuff like that. I mean, what to say and what not to say. Well, part of it is being yourself. But I know I was working with a basketball player, and we were doing a role play. This was not that long ago. And I'm like, okay, pretend I'm the coach, And I was talking to him about, his elevator pitch. Like this is something I actually worked on last summer with kids. I did a boot camp. We talked about an elevator pitch, which was like, what's your 30-second intro about who you are, what you're about, and everything like that. And I was working with, this one kid, I was just kind of just pretend I'm this coach. And I asked you like, hey, tell me something about yourself. And he went on to tell me something such as, I have trouble getting up for basketball games. I don't know how to motivate myself. And I'm like, where's this you would tell a coach that? Some things are common sense to me, but sometimes you don't know. So there's information you can look at, what kinds of questions you can ask, but also you need to know what to say about yourself that puts your best foot forward. And the best thing to do is kind of write some things down about what's important to you, your academic pursuits, who you are, what you like to do, how you get motivated, what makes you tick, things like that. Those are always good things to say. And then in terms of questions and the communication is, what do you think you need to know about the program, about the school? And I wouldn't just focus just on the program too. You should know more about the school. So for you, Anna, about fencing is like, what's important to you about playing on is it about camaraderie for a team, or is it about individual accolades, about traveling and who you play? Is it about, I don't know. Find that out. Once you know about more what you want, you probably have better questions to ask about what to say. And then what not to say is, most of the times you probably know what not to say. It's just you have trouble controlling that. You just have to practice that. So practice what you say. Practice the communication. Work with a friend. Work with your family and practice what you're going to say. Don't go in cold. Okay?
And the most important part of any email that you will ever send a college coach is what you put in the subject line and header. Because that is what's going to get a college coach's attention and their decision to maybe even open the email or choose to delete it. So it's really important that you put some information in the subject line or header that stands out, that will make a coach want to open that email.
All right, we have, usually, Jen, when I got so many good questions, I usually stay on a little bit longer, try to answer as many as I can. So why don't we'll go like 10 to 15 more questions, 10 to 15 more minutes. But Cole's asking about, you got some emails, showed interest through email. What should be my next step? Cole, next step, first of all, interest to me is different than interest to some kids sometimes. And so, is it a generic email? Are they actually being very personable in the email? What are they actually saying? But part of it, the next step should definitely be replying if you're interested. If you're not interested in that school, you should kindly say no, thank you. But the part of it is, if it's early in the process, you got to start having the conversation, starting the dialogue. So your next step is returning the dialogue.
Okay. So sorry about that, but Cole, if you are getting phone calls from Division I coaches right now and you're a junior, you need to step it up, and you need to step it up quick. All right. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you need to be talking with these coaches on the phone, and you need to be scheduling unofficial visits with them this spring, or you need to make sure that they're seeing you play. I think it's either basketball or baseball. See that you play. So that would be the next step. You have the phone call. So it works like this. You send email, then you want phone calls, you want them to look at a video, then you want to get on their college campus, you want them to see you play as soon as possible. Okay, obviously you're very good.
Yeah, Cole's a junior. Let me see his sport. So yeah, if you're a junior, Cole, and you're getting emails, yeah, the next step is they can call you back. They can talk to you on the phone. It's need to actually have face-to-face or phone-to-phone conversations with them and start that dialogue. It's that important. And you got to, again, when Jen says to step it up, it's about creating a relationship with them now and early.
Right. And yes, I think it's great. This question is, should you go to practice? What should you do? Yes, I would try to see them practice. I would go to their games. I would see them, play against obviously other, competition, which is great. All that's really important. Good questions, Cole.
But I would also, not just the team, what does the school have to offer? I would ask questions about the school. What is the kind of the school experience? Is it a big school, small school? What do you like? take a look at the campus. What does it have? Like, again, is it all about the sport for you? I don't know. But if it's also about the school, what does the school have too? So when you're going to check out the team practice, what else can you do? You want to check out the library because you're going to be a chem major? I have no idea. And you're going to be in the library a lot. Does it have this, what you need to have at the library? I don't know. So there's a lot of questions, but the good news is you can make that happen now, and just what you need to do. So, how involved should I get my high school or club coach in my recruiting? My coach said he would do some stuff for me. What is the coach's role? So, the good old thing, you hear that quite often.
So I think that, that's a big question, because I think one of the misconceptions is that your coach will get you recruited. And really, your coach's job is to train you to compete, to perform, so that you can have an opportunity to get recruited. Of course, there'll be certain coaches that can do more for you, and it depends on your relationship with them. Well, what happens if your coach doesn't like you? Does that mean that you can't get recruited? Absolutely not. So your coach will play a role. There will be a time that your coach will need to talk to college coaches, but it's certainly not the driving factor in this process, and it is not. Your coach is not the person that needs to develop the marketing plan and brand yourself. After you've been after you've been in communication with college coaches, a high school or club coach will then need to give a college coach an evaluation. So it's important that your coaches can help you, but definitely at the right time. It's not their job to be your full-time administrative assistant, which that's what your parents end up becoming in this process, because there's a ton of time that you will spend. The average email that you will send and receive over the course of your recruitment before you get recruited is well over 1,000. So there's a lot that's involved in this process.
Yeah, and to kind of go on the coach's role and everything, I like to put it back on my student athletes and the families, but especially the student athletes, that it's the coach. You need to be telling, and I said this earlier, telling the coach what you need from them and what your interests and goals are. But you need to be the director of this play. You need to be saying, Coach, these are the schools I'm interested in. If you know any of these schools, help me out or invite them here, let them do. But you're still going to do your thing. But you're telling the coach, here's what's important to me for the school and the experience, telling them that. Can you write me a recommendation? So I'm going to put it on my online profile or something. But you're telling them the things you need from the coach. And you need to see if they're willing to do that or not. But you can't just rely on that. You're still going to do your part, which is to contact the coaches directly and do these other things and all that stuff. I'm going to call them directly. But you can tell and coach your coach on what you need from them. So that's how I would use your coach and use their role, as opposed to, I know too many athletes that I've worked with or have talked to that have come in and saying, oh, my coach is really good and they're good with these schools. And I'm going, well, are those your list of schools? And a lot of times they're not always their list of schools as well. So again, you take control of it. It's in your hands, and don't rely on anybody but yourself. And ask people if they can do it. It's almost like asking for a teacher recommendation when you actually apply to colleges. You're asking them to do you a favor, and you give them some information and ask them to do that for you. You do the same thing with the coaches. All right, we talked about showcases and camps. How far will a college or colleges overlook poor academic performance?
Well, it really depends on the school. If you can't get into any of the high academic environments like the Ivy League schools or the Stanfords, the Northwesterns or Dukes, there is not a whole lot of leeway academically, because they have the numbers, the students that do have those academics to get into those schools. However, if you are let's say a 3.0 student athlete, and you are trying to get to, a big school, and you are that talented, or any school for a matter of fact, college coaches typically have some leeway, but not a whole lot.
All right, we got another question in from Whitney, my soccer volleyball player, about online profiles. Should you set up a profile, and what does that look like? For me, Whitney, I like that for my student athletes, and the reason being, especially too, is if they have a big like they're looking both coasts. They're looking, East Coast, West Coast, all over the country maybe. And it gives your potential evaluators an opportunity to see you if you have some type of online profile, to house your schedule, to house recommendations from your coaches, to house a highlight video if you're playing a sport like soccer or volleyball, and they might be able not to get to see you. It just gives you, again, another part of branding yourself, and it's part of those marketing assets that can help benefit you. But it also depends on what else do you have out there. I don't know your social media profile and all those other things that you can do, but it's one piece to the whole puzzle. But again, I don't know where you play and what kind of exposure else you get, but I like the idea of kind of an online profile on a website that when you email someone, you can send them a link with something like that.
So no, it's not necessary to set up a website. You can. I agree with Anthony regarding an online profile, and you can do it for free. And all you do is type in online recruiting profile, recruiting service, and like a gazillion of them will come up. We are actually have a strategic partnership with one very large and very successful organization that has incredibly innovative technology where student athletes are able to create a player profile and quite a bit more. But understand a couple things. If you do put a profile online, it's really important to keep it current, okay? And do not ever think at one time that registering and paying a recruiting service is going to actually get you recruited. Okay. There's a lot of recruiting services. It's a great platform. There's a lot of educational information they can get to you, but understand these college coaches get inundated with thousands of emails from recruiting services. And so really the best way is to actually contact a coach directly. There's nothing wrong with including a profile online link when you do that.
Yeah, this whole recruiting process, guys, is about the communication with you and the coaches ultimately. So you can have a profile, but if you don't communicate with the coaches directly, this stuff isn't going to happen for you. You know, it might not or happen the way you want it to happen. So make sure you remember that. All right, guys, last few questions, and we're going to hit maybe one more here. What are some good questions to ask coaches? Jen, over your years and stuff like that, what are some of the, working with all the student athletes you've had, what are some things that were the trends of things that you had your athletes making sure they were asking the coaches?
Right. So I actually have some great information. I'd be happy to give it to y'all if you want to contact me after. But it really depends on where you are in the process. And, is it a first interview? Is it a first phone call? Is it a second? Are you meeting the coach in person? So it really depends on where you are in the process. But I do think it's important that when you reach out to a college coach and if they reply, that you need to reply back and ask a few questions. So, I mean, obviously a great question is, coach, I'm just curious, what are your recruiting needs for my recruiting class? Are you looking to recruit players at my position? I see that you, have a major interest that I'm also interested in. And maybe ask them a question about that. So it really just depends. There's so many questions to ask college coaches, but it is important that you ask them and at the right time. And that's a lot of the things that I do working with families, student athletes individually, is understanding where you are in the process and what specifically for you as a student athlete is that next step, and it's different for every single student athlete because it depends on what sport and where you are in this process, and honestly what your level of recruitment is.
Yeah, I mean, like the first email, you wouldn't be asking. Now I'm. Dan, you want to turn your mic off? I don't know if I'm repeating myself, but I hear an echo now. All right, let's see if that works. Yeah, that works. So something like you wouldn't ask the coach on your first email or your second conversation is like, when can I expect a financial package or a scholarship? You wouldn't ask that early. So timing is really important with some of the questions. Some of the things I want to make sure when I work with student athletes that they're asking, talking about such things, if it's especially important, what kind of academic support is offered for the athletes? Is there a tutoring center, things like that? The support you would receive as a student athlete. What does a typical day look like with schedules and practices and things like that? If you are if you are being recruited and he's really looking at you, or you're not sure if you're on the board or making it, what are some things you would like to see me work on? You know, where do you think I could be on the recruiting board for you? That might be something later on that you have those conversations. So again, timing is important where those questions are asked, but there's so many good questions out there. Again, how is it tied to what's important to you? You know, and if it's important that you play as a freshman, then you need to be very direct after you've had a couple conversations with the coach. Like, do you think I would be able to play as a freshman? Then ask that. Okay. All right. I think we're going to start wrapping it up at 7:15 now. Any last questions? I'm done with the questions on the board. A couple of things I want to finally mention. Ask a couple more questions if you want, but is two things. For my juniors on the call, I'm doing an SAT, ACT free self-paced boot camp. You can find that on our website. So my juniors who have to do some testing, SAT or ACT, again, this is really important to become a recruited or be recruited or part of make yourself more marketable is taking it and having a good test score. So we're doing something like the free self-paced online prep. You can go here. Some tutors and I kind of put this together. It's just a good thing for beginning test preppers. Okay. If you go to this website, which is our website, there is a prep resource handout for those of my my juniors or my sophomores over the summer. This might be good for you, but it's a resource about testing. And then over here is a timeline and grade level checklist on this page. Again, it's all on our website. There's just different parts of our website, but this kind of walks you through a checklist of step-by-step things you need to be doing freshman year or sophomore year. So download the junior checklist if you're a junior. Download the sophomore one. And there's information on your timeline and testing, all things that go into this process that a lot of student athletes forget to do because it's not just about the sport. There's a whole other thing. You have to make sure even to get to a school, you know, you have to take the required entrance exams. If you don't have those, it doesn't matter how good you are. Okay. So make sure you keep on track with that. So feel free to download these here. And then we have some other events coming. So I'm going to send you a handout right now. So if you can download that, I've got two great events coming up about finding your best fit college. Okay. I'm going to share it right now. And it's coming up at the end of February, and it's going to be offered at Dana Hills and Tesoro. Love to see you there. A friend of mine's coming out, and we're going to be talking about finding your best fit college and about college rankings. And so it's a different perspective than the sport thing, but it's part of going to college. And I'm also going to send you another one about an event we're doing in March about being on the admissions committee and doing a mock case study. And then there's a great mini college fair for some out-of-state colleges. So I think especially some D3 schools and smaller schools, private schools, but they're out of state. So it'll just give you an opportunity to meet some of those schools. Some are public schools, some are private schools. You know, I really think, you know, University of New Mexico or Boise State and just different schools that aren't maybe on your board. So that'll be in March. So I'm going to send that as well. So please grab that if you want to download that. I'm going to stop this share and I'm going to share the next one. Download it and save it to your desktop. Okay. And then with that said, I want to thank Jen for coming out. I really appreciate, Jen, all your insights and your information. Guys, we had a treat tonight. She's such a great expert. She's helped so many student athletes over the years earn their way and get college scholarships, be happy in their sport, and move on to the better things in life. So again, reach out to her.
Thank you.
Your email again, you want to shout it out to everybody?
Yeah, so my email is jnoonan, so J, then my last name, which is Noonan, Noonan, and the company is collegesportsquest.com. jnoonan at collegesportsquest.com, or you can Google College Sports Quest. And I would love to offer each of you that are part of this event tonight a complimentary strategy session. This would be with both parents and the student athletes. If you would like to contact me, I'd be happy to do that. And I would also love to be able to provide you with a little more information pertaining to recruiting to your sport specifically, especially when recruiting happens. I have those percentages for each sport freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, if you'd like that information as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. And again, too, Futurology is also an opportunity to meet with one of our college counselors and have a one-on-one if you feel like you need a little bit more personal attention. We have that available to you Monday through Friday. During the school week, parents can come in as well with the student athlete, or the student athlete, you can come in by yourself, but we can help you with the college planning process. We do have a lot of fantastic events that will help you get that information as well, so please attend those. My email is on the board, but we thank you for your time. Have a good night, everybody. And again, Jen, thank you very much.
You're welcome, and go USA!
That's right. So I'll stay on for a little bit longer if you want to hang out or if you have a couple more questions. But other than that, you guys are free to go. The recording will be up probably, midweek this week. And have a good night.
All right. Good night.
Bye, Jen.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye, Anna. Erica, see you later. Thank you. Thank you. Eric, make sure you go watch that college fair session that I did. That'll help you, I think, with a lot of the things and the actual pieces to recruiting that we're talking about, and that'll help you on the process. Thank you, everybody. Good night. I'm going to log off now. Have a good evening.